Hello everybody, Realm Builder Guy here, and welcome back to the channel, and a new Imperator Rome guide. Well, I had previously done a 5 fun starts type guide. I had alluded to the fact that I do plan on doing kind of these regional guides like I do for Crusader Kings 3, so go check those out if you're new here on the channel and you haven't done so before. So in these guides, in case you are new, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this guide and you don't want to miss any other Imperator Rome, Crusader Kings 3, or other type guide videos or Let's Plays or anything else here on the channel. And if you do end up enjoying this video, a like is always appreciated, really helps the channel. But anyway, these type of guides are very focused on the people. As someone who is an academically trained historian, people are what make history. Yes, events, but events are shaped by people. Yes, events also shape people, but still, people are a core element. And going into the history of a few of these people and nations and cultures, I feel like it adds so much depth to your own playthrough in Imperator Rome or any historical strategy game. So I will be talking about cultures, tribes, because this is Germanic Tribes, of course, as well as some strategies and just general things to keep in mind if you're going to play a migratory tribe in Imperator Rome. But before I really get into this guide, I want to send a big thank you and shout out to Andy Bitaway. If I mispronounce your last name, I do apologize. Andy is the latest supporter on Patreon, came in not just at the hero tier, but at the requested guide tier. If you want to find out more about Patreon and the different levels and what it all entails, there's a link in the description, along with a link to the Nexus GG store, where you can pick up a copy of Imperator Rome and a bunch of other games, as well as a link to the Discord and Twitch and Twitter and all that good stuff. So, now that all of that's out of the way, I want to get into today's guide. And why have I picked the Germanic Tribes? For those of you that are not new to the channel, you know that I am German. I'm German and American, as obviously you can kind of hear. Aber ich bin auch Deutsch. I am German. And so the Germanic Tribes is something that has always fascinated me. And so I figured for the first kind of regional guide, we will dive into this core group of migratory tribes we have in Imperator Rome. But before we do that even, I want to give a recommendation for a book from Peter S. Wells. I have The Barbarians Speak: How the Conquered Peoples Shaped Roman Europe. Now, this is a history book, but it's also an anthropology or an anthropological archaeology type book. It is not narrative history. So if you think of something like a book from Holland, like Rubicon or Persia on Fire, you know, that's more narrative history. This is definitely more academic history. It's only about 230 pages. It was written or published in 1999, so it's a little older. It's over 20 years old, but it still holds true. And it's really fascinating because it looks at life on the Roman frontier also from the perspective of the quote-unquote barbarians, the conquered, the Germanic tribes, especially what life was like on the frontier before Rome, after Rome, and during Rome, and how they really shaped Roman Europe. So The Barbarians Speak from Peter S. Wells. I recommend it. I don't even know how much it is, and you probably get it on Amazon now, but go check that out. Like I said, it's an academic read, so if you like narrative, easy fly-through history, then maybe this is a little drier. Well, it is a little bit drier, but it's only 230 pages. So even for a drier, more academic history book, it's definitely worth the read. All right, so the way this is going to go, we have in Imperator Rome, obviously you have overall culture groups. If we look at your cultural map mode, you can kind of go out a little bit. You know, you've got your Germanic culture groups, and then you have like your Gallic and so on. But what we're looking at here are the different cultures found within the Germanic realm. and that's predominantly Suebian, Saxonian, Anglian, Gothonic, Vandal, Bastarnae, Hepulian, Cimbrian, Teutonian, Rugian, Romerician, Gutoni, and we have Suioni. So these guys over here are not going to be part of today's guide. Instead, we're just going to focus on these people right here. And in some cases, I'm going to go kind of macro and just and talk about the culture and then go into the individual tribes. In some other instances, I'm just going to talk about the culture because the tribes as they are listed in the game, yeah, there's not a lot of historic evidence that they actually existed. More named after regions or something like that, or there's just not a lot there to really go off of aside from anecdotal evidence or kind of a, Tacitus kind of saying, oh yeah, those guys existed. Anyway, moving on. So that, when it comes to that, I'm not going to go into that. We've got some that are a little confusing I want to talk about. Some that I feel like I understand why Paradox put them in here, even though I feel like maybe they're not part of the culture group they are assigned to. And I have one very specific, example of that, maybe even two, but one very specific one where maybe some people will debate. And then talk also on occasion a little bit about how things are worded. And you will know when that happens because I'm not going to get agitated, but I will talk about it in that instance as far as the verbiage that was used and has still been used until recently, I feel like, in historical writing. But we're going to start off with one of the largest culture groups, and those are the Suebi. Now, the Suebi are one of the largest Germanic culture groups. Caesar actually characterized them in his writing about the Gallic Wars as one of the most warlike Germanic tribes. Now, why did Caesar speak about them in conjunction with the Gallic Wars? Even though they came from the eastern parts of modern-day Germany around the river Elbe, which is over here, which they are represented as in the game. Well, it is because they actually had multiple incursions into Gaul and Italy and supported even these guys down here, the Treveri, which are a Belgic culture group, Gallic tribe, in their resistance to Rome. So the Suebians would come kind of across the Rhine, help out their buddies in Gaul against the Romans, and then head back across the border before Caesar could kick their butt. Even though Caesar did cross the Rhine and occasionally, quote unquote, punish the Germanic tribes for, fending off Roman incursions, but it didn't happen all that often. Now, they were pushed into Iberia, the Suebians were, in the 4th century, at least one section of them. We'll get into all of these in a bit because of course, Attila and the Huns. They established kingdoms in both Spain and Italy, but those that stayed in Germany, their names are given to regions that are reflected in today. Suabia, Schwaben, Bavaria, Bayern, Thuringia, Thüringen. And actually, the Suabian language is considered the root of modern Hochdeutsch, High German, and the root of a lot of the Southern German dialects, be it Bavarian, the Swabian dialect, Badener dialect, Swiss German, or the variety of dialects you have in Austria. Now, that is the culture group of the Suebians. Now, the Suebians themselves are definitely recognized as individual tribes. The first one I'm going to talk about is one out of my own backyard in Germany, right down here. And that is the tribe of the Cheruscia, or Cheruscans. And, of course, you cannot speak about the Cheruscans without Hermann the German, Arminius, who led the revolt against Rome that culminated in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, or Teutoburgerwald, which is about 40 minutes away from where I'm from in Germany. Now, the battle itself, in which Varus and 3 Roman legions were completely annihilated, didn't immediately lead to a withdrawal of the Romans. That came about 5 years later. They just said it's not worth it. Those tribes and what Arminius has going on, we just can't fight that. Now, the Cheruscans kind of disappeared in the 4th century AD, and it is assumed that they were absorbed by the Saxons and I will get into Saxons in a minute. Now, when we say disappeared from historical record, that basically means the Romans didn't care enough anymore to write about them. That doesn't mean they actually literally just vanished. Okay, they're not the Anasazi of Europe, even though there too a lot can be debated. But this is about this, not about that. So they cease to exist in the sense of a unified tribal confederation, and the greater blob that was Saxons kind of just swallowed them up. I assume they still existed and still called themselves Cheruscia under the guise of the greater Saxon movement, whatever that is. And I'll get into Saxons here in a minute, but that is the Cheruscia. What can you do as the Cheruscia? Well, you're on the frontier. You can migrate to a lot of this land. Now, they stayed in their home region, so maybe just expand out this way, kind of build a little frontier kingdom here if you want to play it a little bit historical. Otherwise, of course, go wherever you want. You're a migratory tribe. The world is your oyster. Now, next to them, we have the Marcomannians. Now, Marcomannia, they were actually allied with Caesar during the Gallic Wars. But then later in the 2nd century AD, they fought Rome in the Marcomannic Wars because they eventually moved all across the place. Now, a lot of these conflicts were created by other tribes pushing other tribes into a direct conflict with Rome. Now, they moved to northern Portugal, supposedly, and supposedly established the kingdom of Galicia. Of course, Galicia. If you want to find out more about the kingdom of Galicia and how it plays at least in CK3, I do have an Al-Andalus achievement run here on the channel that you can go check out. Those are the Marcomannians. Just to the north of them are a significantly more historically profound tribe in the Langobards, or here Langobardia, or as history knows them as well, the Lombards. That's right, these are the Lombards that originated from southern Scandinavia, but then continued their southern migration. We find them here as they have kind of moved into north-central Germany. They allied with Arminius and the Cheruscans against the Romans. And once the Roman threat was pushed further south, well, the Langobards kind of followed them. And in fact, they crossed into Italy down here through the Alps in 568 and conquered Italy from the Ostrogoths, who we will speak about later, and ruled Italy until they themselves were conquered and overthrown in 774 by none other than Charlemagne and the Franks. So those are the Langobards. What can you do here? Well, obviously, these are migratory tribes. You can go a lot of different places, but you can also conquer your neighbors. You are internal. I would always recommend going here against the Semnonians or the Marcomannians to kind of get to a border, so it just makes migration significantly easier. But Langobardia, if you want to play as the historical Langobards, you're going to start moving down south here, and eventually, well, you're going to butt heads with Rome. Before you butt heads with Rome, though, just make sure you are, honestly, ideally no longer a migratory tribe, because legions crush levies. In the beginning of the game, levies are super powerful as a migratory tribe, but once you are mid-late game and you're dealing with a lot of legions, legions will kick your Langobardian butts. Now moving a little bit to the east of the Suebians, we have the Bastarnae, who are represented just as Bastarnia in the game. Now the origin of the Bastarnae is a little bit disputed. Most consider them a Germanic tribe, some say Celtic, and even some historians call them Scytho-Sarmatians. But they're probably more Germanic or Celtic. In general, Greco-Roman historians could not quite differentiate, or just refuse to differentiate in their hubris between Germanic and Celtic tribes. But no matter what their origin is, they moved down south into this area right here in the Carpathian Mountains. They became close allies with the Sarmatians and were actually allied with Rome, which was a smart play if you go into this area, until about the 2nd century AD, when they then allied with the Sarmatians, then later the Goths, and invaded and settled a lot of the Balkan provinces of Rome. Now here, you're on the perfect border and the perfect frontier. You have a lot of room until you deal with anybody, and you have all these mountains here that will help create a natural border for you to expand through. So this could be an interesting one to see if you can build a little Carpathian kingdom. Next, we've got these two right here, Lugia and Scyria. And what's interesting about them? They are Vandals. Now, Vandals, you have a cool achievement run that's possible in Iron Man mode here in Imperator Rome, where you can become a Vandal and move to North Africa, because that is what they did. Now, the Vandals were a Germanic tribe, as obviously, and they did come from this region of modern-day Poland. They eventually moved south during the Marcomannic Wars and settled in an area that nowadays we know as Pannonia, or that was called Pannonia, which is kind of this big swath right down here. A lot of people moved down to the Danube. Of course, they moved down there, and then thanks to the rise of the Huns, pushed them west all the way to Iberia around the year 400. So you have to see the Vandals move down here. The Huns moved over here. So that pushed them all the way through the Alps, through Gaul, and into Iberia. So you're starting up here, you're ending up right here. Well, you're not technically ending up there, because in 429, following the Visigothic invasion of Iberia, they actually resettled in North Africa, creating a Vandal kingdom that encompassed northern Africa, Sicily, Corsica, Sardinia, Malta, and the Balearic Islands. They continued to fight off the Romans, who wanted to reconquer some of their old lands, and it even got so far that they went all the way over here to Rome and sacked Rome in 455. And the destruction and havoc that the Vandals unleashed upon the city of Rome and its citizens led to the term vandalism. That's why we have the term vandalism today. Now, the kingdom of the Vandals actually collapsed in 534 when they were conquered by Justinian, who came from Constantinople and wanted to rebuild the old Roman Empire, and really got pretty dang close. And the Vandals, unfortunately, fell victim to that. Now, beyond that, we also have the Lugi of Lugia. Now, they were a tribe, as again, Vandals from up here. They did not follow their Vandal brethren to North Africa. They stayed in this area, and they became a major player in the amber trade of the Amber Road. Now, the Amber Road, I'll just zoom out, kind of came from this region of the Baltics and moved all the way through and into Gaul. This is the Amber Road. And then from Gaul into Rome and the rest of the world. And as you can see, as it moved along here, you could not progress down the Amber Road without dealing with the Lugi. So building a trading empire with Lugia could be really, really interesting if you can pull that off. Playing tall with a migratory tribe, again, settle and centralize and become, I don't know, republic, monarchy. That's up to you. But that's definitely the direction you want to go eventually. Now you can take Scyria, which really wasn't a tribe that you could find a lot about, and do the other Vandal achievement in the sense that you migrate south and then into North Africa. So Vandals, very, very interesting group of people. Now we're moving just north of the Vandals, and we're going to deal, and actually quite a bit north, with the Goths. Now, we've got a little bit of a dispute going on here. And Paradox decided to, and I didn't speak to anybody at Paradox, so I cannot confirm this. This is purely speculation on my side. Decided to go with both origin theories of the Goths. Because in Guthaunia, as well as in Dania, you have the Guttoni culture group. Now, if you go down here in Gothonia and Limovia and Rugia, you have Gothonic. So that leads you to believe that these are the Goths. Now, there are two major origin theories behind the Goths. One of the most influential, important, and renowned Germanic tribes. Now, the one origin theory is that they came from Jutland, and if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize, even though I obviously pronounce it correctly, in southern Sweden. And the other origin story is that they came from the Upper Vistula area of Poland, which is obviously right up here. Now, no matter which origin story you go with, even the historians who say they came from Scandinavia agreed that they eventually migrated to this area of Poland. So split the difference. You can start as Goths here. You can start as Goths there. That's up to you. I personally would probably start down here versus here. But if you want to go the ultimate origin story, maybe the Goths from Guthonia, and you can settle across here. There's some land you can migrate to. But anyway, so what about the Goths? Now, a lot of you know a lot about them. Now, the Romans referred to them as the Gutones in Greco-Roman tradition. Now, they moved to the Black Sea region in the 2nd century AD. So they went from up here all the way down to down here on the Roman frontier. And they actually became a major force within the Roman army. Now, in the 3rd century, they got a little bit unhappy with their Roman semi-overlords, and the first raids in the Roman Empire happened. But then, about a century later, they started getting pushed actually physically into Rome because, again, the Huns came a-calling. And this push into Rome led to the famous Gothic split between the Visigoths, or the Good Goths, as that is translated into, or Ostrogoths, so the Eastern Goths. So Visi does not mean west, but it kind of sounds like west, so it's an easy way to remember. Ostro, east, Visi, west. Hey. But anyway, the Visigoths allied with Rome in their fight against Attila and the Huns. They eventually established kingdoms in both southern Gaul and Iberia. They tried a few times to get into Italy, but it never quite worked out. They were eventually, so the great Visigothic kingdoms of Hispania, Iberia, Spain, whatever you want to call it, fell in the 8th century, so roughly about 300 years after they established their kingdoms here and pushed the Vandals out that I mentioned to before. They were conquered in the 8th century by the Umayyad Caliphate from North Africa. Now, what happened to the Ostrogoths? Now, the Ostrogoths were sitting over here. Now, they were quickly subjugated by the Huns and allied with the Huns. But after Attila died, they fought everyone. I mean, everyone. They fought the Huns. They fought their, the tribal neighbors, and they fought the Romans and conquered and became the powerhouse in Pannonia that I had mentioned previously. Now, under the leadership of Theodoric, they conquered Italy in 493. And the reason why is because the Roman emperor sitting in Constantinople said, yeah, you're too much of a threat for us here. How about you go to Italy and reconquer Rome? And Theodoric did that in 493. Now, it only lasted for a good 75 years before eventually the Lombards came calling, conquered Italy, and assimilated the Ostrogoths into Lombard society. So what do you do if you are one of these Goths up here? Now, you can establish your own Scandinavian kingdom. You can conquer your neighbors and then kind of build out here. If you're going to take some of the, let's call them Polish Goth, you head down south, conquer your neighbors, get a good border, and then start migrating south. You're a migratory tribe. Migrate, establish a Gothic kingdom. Wouldn't it be great to actually build a Gothic kingdom here, become a settled tribe, and then eventually become a monarchy, as they did in real life, and then conquer this entire region? Now remember, it's not going to be easy. Thrace is going to be a problem. Macedon is going to be a problem. The Antigonids will be a problem. Epirus will be a problem. And eventually Rome will probably kick everybody's butt. So those are the Goths in Imperator Rome. All right, now we're going to move back over to the west, and we're going to talk about an entire culture group that always kind of bothers me as an historian, and that is, we're going to speak about the Saxons. Now, the Saxons are always spoken about as one gigantic tribe, but they were distinct tribes. They were individual groups of tribes that are culturally put together as Saxons, even though they were very distinct and different. There are not really any historical references, or very few, about Saxons until about the 5th century AD. And of course, that coincides with the invasion, quote unquote, of Britain from a raiding culture. Now, I disagree a little bit about the verbiage that we use here. Again, this is semantics. You may not care about this, but as you notice, what I've been mentioning before is all these other tribes, they migrated. Historians always say they migrated here, they migrated there, they got pushed by the Huns and they migrated there. But Saxons, no, they invaded and conquered Britain. Well, maybe they just migrated there. And that was the best way to migrate, because where are they going to go? In the 5th century, you still have the Huns you're dealing with and all the wars in Central and Southeastern Europe. So you're not going to move down there. You have powerful other Germanic tribes to deal with. And some of these quote-unquote Saxon tribes actually acted as mercenaries for the Romans when they invaded Britain. So Britain was known to them. They didn't just hop on a boat and go, hey, let's just sail and see what happens. No, they knew Britain was there because they had fought there. They knew the British people, they knew the Roman infrastructure, and they knew what they could do, especially after the fall of Rome. So it's my own little bugbear. Agree, don't agree? Let me know in the comments if you agree that instead of saying they are the conquering, invading Saxons, that instead we go with they migrated there for multiple reasons, and one of the reasons I'll get into here in a minute. So just let me know. Anyway, rant done. So first we're going to talk about the angry people, the Angrivaria that sit right here. You have a little bit of a frontier to migrate into, which is quite nice. Now they originated from this area, the Weser River area in northwest Germany. They allied with Arminius to fight back the Romans until he died, and then they went, hey, Romans, we're your buddies now, because Germanicus came, and they didn't want a piece of Germanicus. So those are the Angrivarians. But here we have one that I just feel like is so distinct as a culture group and such an interesting people, and those are the Frisians. To just say they are all Saxons, don't know about that. Now, they are known as mercenaries for the Roman invasion of Britain, so they already knew about Britain. And they are one of them, so you have the Saxons, the Angles, and the Utes, who settled in Britain. Now, the area the Frisians settled is down in this area, around Kent. And one of the reasons why they settled, they started depopulating this entire coastal region around the 3rd century and completed it into the 5th century when, of course, you had the quote-unquote invasion of Britain by the Anglo-Saxons. The reason why they started leaving this region was because of marine transgression. What marine transgression means is the rising of the sea levels. And this was down to massive climate change. And that is a reason. So these Germanic tribes tended to move because others moved them. These Germanic tribes ended up moving because the climate moved them. They were starving. The Frisians had to move because they couldn't live there anymore because everything was underwater. And it actually took about 200 years until this region was repopulated to the level pre-3rd century. So as Frisians, your natural migration is going to be here into the Netherlands, conquer this area, become the Frisian powerhouse that you were destined to be, since you will not have marine transgression actually replicated in the game. So that would be my recommendation here. Forget about Britain. Just make this yours. Have the Rhine River as your major border to all the Belgian and Gallic tribes. Then the next Saxon tribe I want to talk about are the Chauci of Chaucia. Now they live between the Ems. The Ems is this river right here, and the Elbe, which is this river here, and usually settled along the Weser, which is that river right there. Now they are, in the game, they put them on both sides of the Elbe, which is probably about right. Now, they're a little bit tricky because historically they actually played both sides with the Romans. So sometimes they supported Arminius, sometimes they supported the Romans. Because they flip-flopped enough and were far enough away from the Romans, Germanicus did not come and kick their butts. So they were saved some of the retribution that some of the other tribes had to deal with. They're renowned as sea raiders. Well, you're along the ocean right here. That's how I would go with them too. If you're going to migrate by sea, or if you can, and kick the Frisians out and just conquer this entire region. The Frisians are your natural born enemies. I would look at Phocea and the Angrivaries as your natural allies, and then push the Frisians out. That's the way I would go there. They were eventually absorbed, there's that term again, by the Saxons in the 3rd century when they disappeared from the historic record, which means the Romans didn't really care about them anymore. But they are also part of this amalgamation of the Saxons, that they probably still existed as their own tribe, like I had spoke about when it came to the Cheruscians. The Chaucians were probably in the same boat, no pun intended, heading over to Britain, so there are them. Now we're heading just north to the province of Anglia. I really like that flag, and the only Anglians in the game are the Anglians of Anglia. Now this is the Holstein and Schleswig region of the Jutland Peninsula, and there's not a lot known about the Anglians until, they were one of the major settlers of post-Roman Britain. And actually, the word England derives from the word Engel, which comes from England and the Angles. Now, the Anglian kingdoms, aside from, East Anglia, that's a little on the nose, you have Mercia and Northumbria. Those were the Anglian kingdoms. Wessex is the major Saxon kingdom that was established. And then, of course, the Britons and the Picts and so on were in the rest of Britain. So those are the Anglians. Again, there's not a lot of historical record about them until they conquered. Now even I'm saying invaded and conquered. Until they migrated to Britain. And the reason why I also, and to get back on this with Anglo-Saxons, why I'm speaking about migration, after the Romans left Britain, there was also a depopulation because, again, we were dealing with climate change. Because don't think that only because it was impacting the Frisians and the Frisian coast that it was not impacting everywhere else here in the North Sea. So you had a depopulation, and you had a people here that understood what was here because they had been there. At least their forefathers had. So again, harping back on migration versus invasion, even though I know I said conquer as well. Now, if you're going to play Anglia in the game, you're going to have to play a little bit of the conquest game before you start migrating. So one of the directions you could go is try to become a settled tribe early and just forget about migration. Conquer Denmark. Become the Anglian kingdom of Denmark. That would be kind of a fun thing to do. Plus, you've got somewhat of an infrastructure here. You've got a port over here. So you've got a little bit to work with there as the Angles. Now, the next ones we're going to here are just to the north. We've got Teutonia and the Teutons and the Teutonian culture. That's right. So heavy infantry, light cavalry, and light infantry is what they have as far as levies go. Now, the Teutons, of course, we know the Teutonic Knights and the Teutonic Forest, and that is where that name comes from. Now, they did originate from this region of modern-day Denmark, or Jutland. They, like so many tribes, and their neighbors here, the Cimbrians, who are their own culture group, but they were together a lot, so these were natural allies. And I'll just cover them both here in one go. Now, they headed down south, but to get south, they first went over here to Gaul, did a lot of raiding in Gaul, all the way to Iberia, and then eventually moved all the way to the Danube, where, if you head down here to the Danube, you will deal with the Romans. And they clashed with the Romans in the Cimbrian War. Now, after defeating the Romans a few times, both the Teutons and the Cimbrians were, of course, eventually defeated by the Romans. The men were put into slavery, they became gladiators, and actually led a gladiatorial revolt eventually. But the women were supposed to become slaves and concubines in Rome. Now, the women said, this is not for us. We will not be degraded like this. We were a free people. So they decided, in a bout of ultimate wanting personal liberty and freedom, they killed themselves and all their kids. And this actually led to, and they did it in one night, supposedly, when they were in captivity, but the Romans weren't really paying attention. They first killed their children, and then all the women killed themselves and each other to avoid the fate of becoming slaves and concubines for the Romans. This led to Romans using the term Teutonic fury, as far as the passion and fury and desire for liberty and freedom, that you would rather choose death over subjugation. And the Romans actually respected them for it. So it's a little bit, not a little bit, it's a very tragic end to these people that just wanted to move south, and odds are moved south due to these same climate issues that we were in general dealing with up here. And it ended up in the demise of the tribes almost completely. Now over here we've got Herulia and Burgundia. And Herulia and Burgundia are part of the Heruli culture group. Heruli are a Scandinavian, they came from southern Sweden culture group and eventually migrated, haha, no surprise, at least the Heruli, down to the Danube region. And again, I spoke about this a few times. Climate has to do with it, as well as that's just where everybody was heading. You know, it's cool, right? No. Climate, and you were able to survive there versus the harsh climate you started to see here. And again, you're a bunch of islands. If this coast is eroding, your coast is eroding too. Now they moved down there, and by the time they got there, then the Huns showed up, and they were subjugated by the Huns. They eventually allied with the Lombards in their conquest of Italy, and then settled around Belgrade. So they moved all the way down here after the Huns fell. They allied with the Lombards, helped them conquer Italy, and then took up lands here, especially around modern-day Belgrade, until 549, when they were displaced by the Avars and kind of disappeared from the historical record at that point. So those are the Heruli. Now, more interesting than the Heruli, in my opinion, are the guys over here, Burgundia. And in fact, from Burgunderholm, or Bornholm, the island of Bornholm, are the Burgundians. That's right, those famous Burgundians. Now, not the Burgundians from EU4. We're talking about the first Burgundian kingdom, what we're going to talk about now. Now, they eventually moved to the Rhine River Valley, the southern part of the Rhine River, in about the 3rd century AD. And they started conquering a little bit down there and established their own kingdom in the beginning of the 5th century around the city of Worms. But of course, then the Huns showed up. Catching a theme here? The Huns showed up and destroyed the kingdom and Worms. Now, this is the Burgundian people that are the basis for the Nibelungenlied. So the song and the saga of the Nibelungs. So we're talking about Siegfried and Kriemhild and Etzel. Etzel is actually Old German for Attila, and Kriemhild is the legendary Germanic Burgundian wife of Attila that supposedly, possibly killed him. In the Nibelungenlied, she did. Now, after Attila and the Huns went away, the Burgundian kingdom reestablished itself, but only for a couple of centuries, because then the Merovingian kings of the Franks absorbed them. You know, conquered, absorbed, and then, of course, the Carolingians came. So, for me, the Burgundians are massively interesting as a playthrough both here, and, hey, if you play Attila Total War, go there. Go crazy with the Burgundians. They are in that game. So you can recreate that little scenario. So that is a historical playthrough that I would find really interesting. How you go about it, you kind of got to get through all of these people or around them to get there. But establishing a Burgundian kingdom down here would be a lot of fun. Now, of course, you have to go from a migratory tribe to a settled tribe and then build a monarchy. But I'm like a broken record at this point. That is just something you're going to have to do. Last, but certainly not least, we're going to talk about 2 Scandinavian Germanic tribes. I'll go over here. These are the Rugi. Now, not to be confused by these guys down here, even though that is where they eventually moved in the 1st century AD. So they moved the Rugi, the culture group of Rugi, if you can see here, the Rugian culture. They moved down here to Rugia. Rugia here is actually Gothonic culture. but it is already named as the region where the Rugians eventually moved to. The ones that I find really interesting are over here, the Sueonia, which are actually the progenitors of modern Swedes and the Viking Norse culture. Tacitus even wrote about that they were fierce sea-raiding warriors. So I don't know if that sounds familiar or not. They also were major trading partners later of Rome because they controlled the northern fur trade. So what you do here? Hey, get on your longboards, I almost said, on your longboats and migrate and conquer some of this territory over here. Move down south. Now, they didn't really. I mean, if you think about it, the Goths left, the Burgundians left, the Rugi left, the Teutons left, the Cimbrians left. Well, all these people left. So all they had to do was basically just settle this entire region, which is basically what they did. But conquering your neighbors, that is definitely the direction I would go if I would play as them. And that could be a really interesting one all the way on the map. You may never deal with Rome, and that's already worth a lot in Imperator. All right, so that is the entirety of the Germanic tribes. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about strategies or what you need to think of if you're going to play as one of these or any migratory tribe, but especially these migratory tribes. You have a ton of open territory to migrate into and settle. Look what's there. Look what the resources and trade goods are. That's something you can do and kind of build your strategy around that. The other thing you want to look at, here you've got a bunch of mountains right here that are natural borders to Rome. You've got choke points that are easy for you to defend against Rome. Keep that in mind. You want to then go from a migratory tribe to a settled tribe by increasing your centralization, which does have some effects, and then eventually become a monarchy or a republic, but a monarchy as well. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting to be a Gothic republic. But by doing that, you ensure you get a higher chance of survival into the mid and late game. Because once the major powers of the Mediterranean come calling, I'm looking right at you, Rome and Thrace, with their legions, they will crush you. Their legions will be completely overpowering to your levies. So migrate in the early game. No problem. By migrating, you need at least 3 pops that you just click the migrate button and you convert them into a migratory cohort of light infantry, and you can move them around the map without needing military access. And then you settle. You click the settle button and you're there. You can move up to 20 pops in one migratory cohort. So the mechanic isn't that hard. You just need the pops, really. It will cost you stability, I believe 8 in stability, but there are some modifiers that can help you out with that. So that's the general strategy. Migrate to an area that you would find interesting or just conquer your neighbors and then work towards centralization. When you know where you want to be, centralize and civilize and then build legions to survive. Now, if you're going to play the Vandal achievement run where you go for North Africa, you're going to have to build up quickly, get your pops, and then get your ass over to Africa as fast as possible. So that's something to keep in mind. You can check out everything as far as achievement runs go. I'll probably do a video about 5 fun achievements as well in Imperator Rome, so keep your eyes out for that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any future Imperator Rome or Crusader Kings content or anything else here on the channel. And until next time, I am Realm Builder Guy, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.